Society tells you that second-guessing yourself is a symptom of low self-esteem. You have been conditioned to believe that if you hesitate, if you overanalyze a situation, or if you doubt your own memory during an argument, you simply lack conviction. This is a convenient lie. For a specific type of neurological wiring, self-doubt is not a glitch. It is the friction caused by an advanced processing engine. It is the byproduct of a brain that refuses to accept simplistic, black and white answers in a highly complex world. Your hesitation isn't a lack of confidence. It is an over-accumulation of data. But this exact cognitive mechanism leaves a psychological backdoor wide open. Today, we are going to decode the 7 psychological tricks that social environments, systems, and manipulative individuals use to make you question your own sanity without you ever noticing. If you recognize even 2 or 3 of these patterns in your life, you will finally understand why you feel so drained in everyday interactions. Pay close attention to number 6. It will completely reframe why you feel like you are losing your grip in relationships, and it will permanently change how you view your own reactions. Trick number 1 is weaponized certainty. Most people use confidence as a substitute for competence. When they are challenged, they immediately double down, raise their voice, and protect their ego. People with high calibration thinking operate in the exact opposite way. When presented with conflicting information, your immediate instinct is to pause and scan your own internal logic for errors. Psychologically, your brain prioritizes accuracy over authority. You treat your own opinions as hypotheses that can be updated with new data. But manipulators see this open feedback loop and they weaponize it. They do not pause to check their own logic. Instead, they inject their absolute, unwavering certainty into your moment of reflection. Imagine you are in a disagreement and you say, "Maybe I misunderstood what you meant. You are simply leaving room for nuance." But they instantly snap back with, "Exactly, you're remembering it wrong. You always do this." They use your willingness to be wrong as absolute proof that they are right. You walk away doubting your memory, but this uncertainty is not a weakness. It is intellectual rigor. You are applying the scientific method to your daily life. The downside is that in a world that rewards loud, ignorant confidence, your careful calibration will constantly get steamrolled, leaving you feeling like you are the one who is confused. This leads directly into the second trick. Trick number 2 is the artificial urgency trap. Most people react to pressure with immediate, thoughtless action. They say whatever comes to mind just to relieve the tension of the moment. People with synthetic, deep-level thinking require a buffer. Your brain needs a moment to gather the variables, run simulations of the outcomes, and formulate a precise response. The psychological trick here is inducing artificial time scarcity. By creating a manufactured crisis or demanding an immediate answer, people push your nervous system into a fight-or-flight state. This effectively bypasses your prefrontal cortex, your logic center, and forces you to react on pure survival instinct. You see this in meetings when a boss demands an immediate answer to a complex strategic question, or when a partner demands you make a life decision during a heated argument. Because you cannot process the complex variables fast enough to meet their artificial deadline, you freeze. You stumble over your words. Later, driving home, you think of the perfect response, and you hate yourself for looking incompetent. Your freeze response is not slowness. It is your brain refusing to deliver a low-quality answer. It is a system overload caused by high internal standards. The unfortunate reality is that you will often look less decisive than people who have no problem speaking without thinking. But here is the part most people miss. Trick number 3 is empathetic mirroring abuse. Most people prioritize their own emotional state above all else. They protect their borders and rarely feel the weight of a stranger's problem. People with advanced emotional intelligence have highly active mirror neurons. You do not just conceptually understand someone else's pain, you psychologically and physically simulate it within your own body. The trick occurs when someone violates your boundary, but instantly plays the victim. They force your brain to process their emotional pain instead of your own justified anger. You might confront a friend for lying to you, fully prepared to hold them accountable. But the moment you speak, they break down. They start crying about how overwhelmed they are, how terrible their week has been, and how everyone is against them. Your mirror neurons hijack your boundary. Before you know it, you are comforting the person who just betrayed you, and you walk away, wondering if you were too harsh. This is not a lack of a spine. It is highly sophisticated empathetic bandwidth being used against you as a psychological shield. The heavy downside is that you end up carrying psychological baggage that does not belong to you, acting as a free therapist for people who use their trauma as a currency to avoid accountability. This is where the psychological manipulation gets deeply personal. Trick number 4 is the false equivalency of effort. Most people measure the value of a contribution by the visible friction it takes to achieve it. If someone looks stressed, stays late, and complains constantly, they are perceived as working hard. Systemic thinkers measure value by structural impact and efficiency. Because your brain naturally optimizes systems and eliminates unnecessary steps, you often make very difficult things look completely effortless. The trick is that observers will minimize your value precisely because you did not suffer enough to achieve it. You might finish a project in 2 hours that takes the rest of the team 2 days. Instead of praising your efficiency, leadership gives you more work, or subtly implies that you must have cut corners. You start to internalize this. You begin to wonder if you are actually lazy, or if you are doing something wrong because you aren't perpetually exhausted like everyone else. Your perceived laziness is actually cognitive optimization. You have built internal frameworks that solve problems before they start. The punishing downside is that in systems that reward the appearance of struggle, your quiet competence will be rewarded with nothing but a heavier burden and a lack of recognition. Which brings us to a very subtle tactic. Trick number 5 is the nuance trap. Most people prefer to live their lives in black and white, right or wrong, good or bad, us versus them. It requires very little caloric energy to think this way. People with cognitive complexity live almost entirely in the gray area. You possess the rare ability to hold 2 opposing truths in your mind at the exact same time without your brain short-circuiting. The psychological trick is when a manipulator forces you into a reductive binary choice, making you look scattered or disloyal when you try to explain the context. In a heated discussion, you might try to say, "I agree with the premise of what you are saying, but the methodology you are using to get there is flawed." They immediately interrupt and declare, "So you are against me." You always take their side. You stumble, you try to explain the variables, you end up sounding defensive, and you walk away doubting your own ability to communicate basic thoughts. Your inability to pick a simple side is not confusion. It is a fierce resistance to reductive thinking. You refuse to mutilate the truth just to make it fit into a convenient soundbite. The downside is that you will find it perpetually exhausting to communicate with people who need the entire world simplified so they can understand it. Now we reach the one I mentioned earlier. Listen carefully. Trick number 6 is pathologizing your standards. Most people will happily settle for low-level social friction just to avoid a direct conflict. They will ignore the elephant in the room, accept mediocre behavior, and stay quiet to keep the peace. People with structural foresight cannot do this. You see exactly how small compromises today lead to massive, catastrophic failures tomorrow. Your brain is wired for calibration and quality control. So, when you ask for clarity, or when you firmly hold a boundary, the trick used against you is a labeling tactic. They do not argue your point, they attack your standard. They label you as difficult, inflexible, or too demanding. You might ask a team member to clarify a vague set of instructions, or you might ask a partner to be specific about their intentions. They sigh, roll their eyes, and say, "Why does everything have to be an interrogation with you? Why can't you just go with the flow?" You immediately retreat. You convince yourself that you are the problem, that your standards are unreasonable, and that you are impossible to please. Listen to me. Your difficult nature is actually structural integrity. You simply refuse to build a house on a shaky foundation. They pathologize your standard so they do not have to put in the work to raise theirs. The painful downside is that you will frequently be cast as the antagonist, the villain in systems and relationships that rely on mediocrity to survive. And finally, the most invisible trick of all. Trick number 7 is the historical rewrite. Most people take words and situations exactly at face value. They experience the present moment in isolation. A high-functioning mind operates as a predictive engine. It constantly reads subtext, shifts in tone, micro-expressions, and historical data to forecast what is going to happen next. Because you connect dots that seem invisible to others, the trick used against you is pathologizing your perception. When you point out a pattern, they call you paranoid. You might notice a slight shift in a colleague's communication style, or a subtle withdrawal from a partner. You bring it up calmly. They immediately deny it, act offended, and tell you that you are manufacturing drama. You start to feel crazy. You tell yourself to let it go. And then, 3 weeks later, exactly what you predicted comes to the surface. Your tendency to overthink is actually high-resolution perception. You are picking up on data points that are mathematically there. The severe downside to this is the isolation. It is an incredibly lonely experience to see the storm forming on the horizon while everyone around you is enjoying the sunshine, telling you that you are crazy for holding an umbrella. We need to stop defining intelligence by pieces of paper, job titles, or external validation. Those are metrics of compliance, not cognition. The goal here is not to declare that you are smarter than everyone else, but to shift the fundamental question you ask yourself when you feel out of place. You need to stop asking, "Am I overreacting? Am I the problem?" You need to start asking, "How is my brain currently being targeted precisely because of how deeply it processes?" When you understand the mechanics of these tricks, they lose their power over you. You stop absorbing the guilt. You stop shrinking your perception to make other people comfortable. You realize that your doubt was never a sign of your weakness. It was a weaponized reflection of your capacity. Take a moment and look back at the 7 points we just covered. Tell me down below which number hit the hardest for you. The one that perfectly described a situation you haven't been able to explain until today.